So today I got a message on my computer from LinkedIn. You know, you're familiar with LinkedIn. It's a place where people go and exchange information career-wise and all that stuff. And I got a note in my email that there was a message for me in LinkedIn, in my LinkedIn account. So I went to the LinkedIn and looked at it. And it was a message from a guy who met me in prison over 10 years ago. And he said that he had done my program in the prison. And the program I was doing at that time involved a course, an intensive 3-day course that the inmates participated in, and it was called the Breakthrough Course. And the intention of the course was to give them a crash course in consciousness, right? So that they could see the possibility and that they could have a breakthrough, right? Have a breakthrough in terms of having a breakthrough and recognizing who they are, having a breakthrough and recognizing that they were free, even though they were in prison, having a breakthrough in recognizing that the future doesn't have to be the same as the past. And so this guy was one of the inmates that did that program with me. And we did it 3 days, 3 full days, right? So if you can imagine, if you could imagine us meeting 3 days all day, you'd want to kill me, right? But so he did the course, and he said that it created a possibility for his life that he realized, and he said that he had been employed by the city of Atlantic City for the last 10 years, and he was now the assistant director of a program to end violence in Atlantic City. So the point that I want to make by sharing this with you, because this is one of many situations where I've gotten feedback like that from guys who were supposed to fail. Guys who really had a lot against them as far as success is concerned. You know, criminal history, right? That's enough so that you can't succeed. But then addiction, coming from poverty, the whole 9 yards. And here he is, he's the assistant director of this program in Atlantic City, and he just wanted to make contact with me because he had come across me on LinkedIn and wanted to know if there was some way that we could connect and that I could provide something for the program that he's working in. But the point in sharing this with you is I want to be clear with you about the fact that this stuff works. One of the things that comes up in the practice of meditation and the practice of being a student of these wisdom teachings is at some point the mind starts to try and question it, you know. In Buddhism, they have a thing called the Great Doubt. They have a thing called the Great Doubt. And what they're saying by this is that's along the way from your first making contact with this possibility, with these teachings and practices, along the way, the mind will try and make stands. The mind will try and take a stand, right? And one of the stands that the mind tries to take is it says that this doesn't work, right? And I hear this a lot from people, you know, that I've been practicing meditation, I've been doing what you've been saying. I hear this from my psychotherapy clients too. I've been practicing meditation, I've been doing what you've been saying, I understand what you're saying, but it's not working. It doesn't work, it's not working. And so they don't want to continue to do it because they feel like, you know, it doesn't work, and maybe it's because of me, because I just can't make my mind stop thinking, even though that's not what this is about. Or, you know, whatever, but it comes up that it doesn't work. And I want you to be clear whether it's that coming up in your mind that it doesn't work or all the rest of the shit that comes up in your mind about this, right? That's not true. It does work. You have to be clear that it does work. This is one of the reasons why I have said to you in the past that you have to make 100% commitment to this process, because what you're up against is going to take something. You're up against a conditioned brain, and you're up against a conditioned mind. And so for you to realize your true nature is going to take something. It's not going to happen by itself, and it's not going to happen easily either. You know, the system is not going to give itself to you just because you have a good idea. No, it's going to keep doing what it does. It's going to keep playing the programming that it plays. And one of the things that I want to see if I can emphasize tonight with you is that when that happens, when the mind produces a thought like it doesn't work, or when the mind does what the mind does, which it judges, evaluates, compares, right? That's what it does, right? A lot of times in my work with people, we're talking about how they are and what they're doing and what's working and what's not working, right? And somehow or other we get into the subject of judging and evaluating, right? Because that's one of the things that people do to each other that causes conflict, judging and evaluating. Comparing ourselves, right? How smart am I? How pretty am I? How wealthy am I? You know, comparing yourself to other people with the idea that, now watch, with the idea that if you're not as attractive as another person, if you don't have the money somebody else has, right? If you're different from other people in terms of not being as good as, based on the current standards that exist, right? Then you feel like you shouldn't expect much, you know? In other words, you give that stuff credibility. You believe it. You believe that stuff. And when I'm working with people, a lot of times when we get into that, I say to people, you know, you need to pay attention so you can see when that's going on and stop doing it. Don't compare yourself to other people. You know, don't do that. Now, notice when you're doing it. Notice, even if you're alone and you're looking in the mirror and you're judging your appearance, right? You're comparing yourself to other people when you're judging your appearance. Based on what standard are you judging your appearance, right? Whether it's your appearance, whether it's how much money you have, whether it's the way your body looks, whether it's the kind of car you drive, you know, this goes on and on and on, right? So it's madness. It's madness. And when I'm working with people, a lot of times I'll say to people, please, you're practicing meditation so you can be awake. You're practicing meditation so you can be aware. Aware of what? Aware of crazy. Aware of being crazy. Aware of what's going on in your mind and in your body so that you don't just keep letting the machine run. So you stop being a machine, right? But here's the deal. You know, when I'm in this kind of interaction with people, I talk that way. I say, you know, you need to pay attention. You need to be aware of when the voice in your head is doing comparing. You need to be aware when the voice in your head is judging and evaluating so you can interrupt it. You need to do an intervention with your own brain, right? I say that to people, right? But here's the thing. You're not actually doing it. And when I'm interacting with somebody, I'm kind of talking to them kind of like they're a person, right? Because that's how we operate in the world, right? But here's the real deal. You're not really doing it. You're not really comparing. You're not really judging and evaluating. If you pay close attention to what's actually happening, right? It's the mind that's doing it. It's the voice in your head, which is the voice of the mind, right? That's what's judging and comparing, right? So then if that's the case, why does it end you up suffering, right? It ends you up suffering because you identify yourself with the voice in your head. You identify yourself with the mind. You're actually innocent. Who you are is innocent. Who you are never compares. Who you are doesn't judge and evaluate, right? But you don't get to experience that if you identify with the voice in your head. Then you think that's you, and therefore you're judging and evaluating. You see? And here's the problem with that, right? That's not going to stop. The voice in your head is not going to stop doing what it does, right? Or if it stops, it's going to take a long time for it to run out of gas to do that. But that's not a problem if you know you're not the voice. That's the thing, right? That's not a problem if you know you're not the voice. You don't even have to stop cursing at the other traffic. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is realize when it happens, that wasn't you. You see? That's the way out, right? So when I find myself in traffic and somebody cuts me off and I say, you know, that asshole, right? I laugh because I just saw my mind do that. Do you understand? But I know I didn't do it. It's automatic. The button got pushed, and when the button gets pushed, the mind produces the reaction. It's all machine, right? So if you do that, now here's why I want you to get clear about this, because if you do that and then you think what I mean, and then you think what I'm saying is don't you do that, right? Then you're in trouble, right? Because you can't stop doing it, right? You can't stop doing it. And then the voice judges you for not being able to stop what it's doing. It gets pretty crazy fast, right? So the way out of it is just to realize it's not you. You are not the voice in your head. Therefore, what it does, it's not you doing it. You're not judging and evaluating. You can let it keep judging and evaluating and know that's not you. You can do that, right? I was brought up in a racist family, right? And when I was a young adult and first started to wake up and see things as they were and realize what the truth was, I knew I wasn't a racist. I had gotten beyond that, I realized that was crazy, right? But every once in a while I would have a racist thought, right? And I would really get scared, like, oh shit, am I still a racist, right? But I realized, no, that's the machine. There was programming put in there when I was a little kid, when I was in my house and my parents were talking racist talk, right? I didn't know anything. You're a sponge when you're a little kid, right? So you just think that's the way it is, right? And it doesn't help. I went to mostly a all-black high school, right? And I got jumped after a basketball game and beaten up, right? So when you put it all together in the brain, it's like racism makes sense, right? The black people beat me up, you see? But the time came and where I realized, no, I had nothing to do with that. It was a program that got conditioned by what I experienced as a little kid. And from time to time, it would play things, right? It would play that stuff. But I could see it playing that stuff, and I knew it wasn't me. So I didn't have to suffer this. I didn't have to suffer the experience of thinking that I was a racist. And you don't have to suffer the experience of thinking that you're judging and evaluating, unless you are, right? Which means that you don't know the difference between you and your own mind. That's what's happening. You don't know the difference between you and your own mind. And if you stop identifying with the voice that's doing the judging and evaluating, and if you stop identifying with the voice that's doing all the comparing, and if you stop identifying with the voice that's doing all the rest of the stuff that it does that doesn't work, right? Then just because you're not identifying with it anymore, it starts to lose its energy. It starts to dissipate. It starts to get quieter and quieter. And there's less judging and evaluating going on. But it does take time, and the beginning of it ending only starts when you know the difference. Do you understand? The beginning of it ending only starts when you know the difference, and when it's happening, you see the truth. And you know that's not me, that's the mind that's going off and doing that type of thing. And if you understand that that distinction is a distinction that most of humanity doesn't have, right? Then you can see why things are the way they are. Because then people think what they think is them thinking it. And that's going to create all kinds of craziness, and it does.
How did you know that when you were younger? I mean, how did you realize that?
Well, in the beginning, it was because of the drugs. You don't know it until you do.
Right, well,
and at some point, and when I said earlier, it was the drugs, very early on when I was because I was a teenager and a young adult during the hippie period, right?
You were the same age as that.
Yeah, so I was being honest with you. When I took LSD, it expanded my mind. And I could see things that I didn't see before, and that's when it started to occur to me that, well, I must be missing something here. And then I started to look into it and find out that it wasn't just the drugs. There were people who practiced things and taught things that were consistent with what I was seeing. And then I got interested in Buddhism and meditation and all that. That's an important thing to understand. Us older folks, which is all of us, you're old. Us older folks feel more of a kind of pressure, to have this work for us. If it's real and it does work, we have more pressure to have it work for us, right? Because it's either that or it goes the way it goes for most everybody else, and it's not a pretty picture, right? When you get old, right? So you have to invest yourself in this, right? But you have to also understand that even though you're old, if you wake up now and you experience enlightenment, you experience, being who you really are, there's no time. Therefore, it doesn't matter whether you woke up now or you woke up when you were 15. It's the exact same reality because there's no time. Yeah, so you don't have to feel like it's too late. It's never too late. As long as you're breathing, you got time. Well, it's not even a matter of seeing it for what it is, because like everything else, I'm pointing out the neurotic element. That doesn't mean you should never make evaluations. It doesn't mean you should never have judgments, right? And there are things in life where judging and evaluating are useful, are realistic, and you should do that, right? But I'm talking about the neurotic aspect of it, right? I'm talking about the part of it that causes unnecessary suffering, right? So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's just like thinking. There's thinking that we all do that's useful, realistic thinking, right? We need to do that, right? That's one of the reasons that people get confused when you start talking about the voice in your head isn't you, and they start thinking, well, how do I deal with this? Do you know what I mean? Because I need to think to remember things. I need to think to do math. I need to think to plan for the future. How do I deal with this? And that's one of the reasons why Ramesh Balsekar's work is so valuable, because he made it very clear that thinking in and of itself is not bad, right? It's when the thinking is unrealistic, it's when the thinking is neurotic, it's when the thinking has to do with the maintenance and survival of this idea we have about who we are that's not true. That's when it's neurotic. When you're consumed with thinking about you and being in control and looking good and having money and having possessions, all that, that's neurotic stuff. That's all crazy. That's crazy stuff. It is not the source of happiness. It is not the source of well-being. So you got to get off that, got to get off out of that rat race. You have to get off that gerbil wheel. You have to understand, it's very important to understand that the fact that the herd is running off a cliff has a tremendous pull, because you think, how can the herd be wrong? How can everybody be wrong? How can our leaders be that wrong, right? Well, I hate to tell you, they are that wrong. And the herd is running off the cliff. But it doesn't mean that you have to run off the cliff with it. That's true now. It was true when Buddha was alive, right? It's been part of the picture all along, that the majority of humanity is still caught up in their infantile way of relating to everything, in their primitive way of dealing with everything, right? As if we're living in a jungle and we're not, right? And that hasn't caught up with humanity yet. And if it doesn't catch up with humanity, then we will go off the cliff. But you see, even if that's the case, that's one of the things I love about these teachings. Even if that's the case, it won't matter if you wake up and you know who you are, right? Because who you are is not living in time, it's not physical, and it won't go off the cliff. You don't go off the cliff. So you can separate yourself from the tribe or the herd, or however you want to look at this, right? And understand that it is very important for you to realize that your welfare, your well-being, your happiness is a function of you, not a function of the society you grew up in. If it's a function of the society you grew up in, you're screwed. Because the way the society is set up, it's to keep control of the group of people. It's to keep everybody under control. It's not for you to be happy, it's to keep everybody under control. And that can become perverted. Because people get power hungry, people get power hungry, people get manipulative, and so the whole thing becomes twisted. So it's like I always say, the first thing you have to do in order to wake up is to realize you're asleep. The first thing you have to do to go sane is to realize you're crazy. And it's a good damn thing. If there's nothing wrong with it, it's nothing to feel embarrassed or ashamed about. It's a damn good thing that you wake up. It's a damn good thing that you know how crazy you are, so you can stop. It's a damn good thing, that you know you're asleep, so you can practice meditation and practice what it's like to be awake. And that's what this is all about. But it's not free lunch. It's not going to happen just because you want it to. It's not going to happen just because it's possible. It's only going to happen if you dedicate yourself and commit yourself to living consistent with what you're learning and practicing it. And that's going to take some time to turn the machine around, to reprogram the computer, to reboot this thing. It's going to take some time for that to happen. But as you go through it, if you're doing it correctly and you're doing it with the commitment that's necessary, it gets easier and easier and easier. It gets easier and easier and easier. And if you do it with a commitment and you do it consistently, you know, you can actually begin to experience unexplained happiness, right? Irrational happiness, right? Happiness that's just occurring, and it may be confusing, like, well, why am I happy? You know what I mean? Why am I happy? I'm not supposed to be happy. I'm not on the... And the reason you're happy, and it may take some time for it to sink in, the reason you're happy is because you've made contact with yourself, is why you're happy. You've made contact with the truth, made contact with the reality of yourself as awareness itself, and the experience of that is happiness. That's just the way it is. The experience of who you are when you're experiencing it is happiness. And so it's confusing because, I've never known this kind of happiness. I've never known happiness that I didn't have to do anything to experience. I never knew happiness that wasn't coming from the money I have or wasn't coming from the attention somebody was giving me. I didn't know happiness like that. But if you really stop and think about it, we did know happiness like that, because there was a time when waking up in the morning was exciting, wasn't it? Yeah, there was a time when waking up in the morning was exciting. When you didn't want to, do you remember when you didn't want to go to sleep? And you couldn't wake up, you couldn't wait to wake up in the morning because you couldn't wait to get started, to play and have fun and enjoy your life? And then you learned that wasn't correct. That wasn't correct. You learned it because you were, if you were living in an ordinary household, you learned it because you watched your parents wake up and be miserable every day. And at some point they might even say to you what my parents said to me is, what are you thinking? What do you think? You think life is easy? You'll find out, right?
The same thing as you.
That's right. And so they correct you. They correct you from being spontaneous and happy, right, to being afraid and annoyed and constricted, right, and confused, right? Then you're on the right path. We can work with you now. We can work with you now. Because when you go to school, they're not interested in kids who are spontaneous and happy, right, that just want to play and have energy and enjoy themselves. No. They want you to learn how to control all that stuff and follow the authority figure in the room. Become a good civilian. That's what counts. I don't care if you're happy, be a good civilian, right? So you learn to be miserable. And you learn being miserable is the status quo. But don't worry, because we have things for you to buy. You see? This is the sick game we're all playing here. It's craziness, right? So stop buying the bullshit, you know? You have to take responsibility for your own life, and you have to take responsibility for getting the happiness that's already available. You have to take responsibility for getting the happiness that's already available. You have to take responsibility for experiencing the possibility that your life is, not the way it goes typically for most people. No, if that's not the way you want your life to go, then you have to take a stand for the possibility. It's not going to happen by itself. Look at the life of Buddha. Look at the life of Buddha. You know, for those of you who read Siddhartha, right, the life story of Buddha, right, it took him years and years and years, and he went through all kinds of suffering trying to figure this stuff out and trying to get to a place. But then at some point, when he was at his wit's end, right, he sat down and he said, I'm either going to die here or I'm going to wake up and see whatever it is I've been missing, right? And that's what I've been referring to when I'm talking about 100% commitment, right? If that's the attitude you have, and it is true that there is a possibility for freedom and happiness, if that's the attitude you have, you can't miss it. You can't not get there. You can't not get there because you'll never give up. If the opportunity and the possibility is real, you can't not get there because you'll never give up. And there's nowhere else to go. That's one of the things people have to understand. This whole process of coming in contact with the teachings and the practices and the truth and so forth, and so that you can get on the path, right? And you can take the path to liberation and so forth, right? The thing that you have to understand about it, in case you haven't noticed, right? There is no other place to go. That's where this whole thing is going. So you can either speed the process up or make the process take longer, but you ain't going anywhere else. Where else are you going to go? Think about it. Where are you going to go? How are you going to be different? How are you going to realize any possibility that can provide for you what you want most? And the reason you want what you want most is because at some level you're aware of the truth. That's why people are dissatisfied. That's what's missing. You know, all of humanity has experienced there's something missing, don't they? All of humanity has the experience that there's something missing. And they try and find what's missing and replace what's missing through conventional means and money and circumstances and so forth, right? But there's an awareness of something missing. How can there be an awareness of something missing if you don't have an experience that what's missing exists? Check it out. How can you have an experience that something's missing if you don't also have the experience that what's missing exists? It wouldn't make any sense, would it? That would be like crazy time. That's craziness, right? So all of humanity already knows who you are. All of humanity already knows who you are, but it's been obscured and it's been buried under all of this other survival stuff, all this reaction stuff, all of this stuff that has to do with identifying yourself as something that you're not as a person, right? So once that gets your attention, you know, when you're a kid and you get up and you're happy just to be alive and play all day, right? But then once you get into that trance and it gets your attention, right? Then all of that starts to go away because you're preoccupied with becoming like everybody else, becoming crazy like everybody else. You're preoccupied. That's what you're giving all your energy and attention to, isn't it? When you go to school, you're giving all your attention and energy to fitting in, to getting along with the other students, to being liked by the teacher, right? You're already in the hypnotic process. And once that takes hold, that's all there is. Once that takes hold, your life is about making money, looking good, being successful, getting along with people using the ways and means you learned as a kid in school. So, you've been involved with this, and the thing that I'm trying to speak to these days is I want to be clear with you that you either have to shit or get off this pot. You do. I said in the last class, you know, I mean, I'm working with a guy right now I'm working with several people right now that are dealing with addiction, so they weren't very happy about me suggesting you go have a beer. But what I meant by that, it doesn't necessarily mean have a beer per se, right? But sometimes in this life and the practices and the teachings that we're dealing with and all the factors that we're dealing with, sometimes you may have to take a break from everything, and just, you know, be still and be quiet. You might even learn to meditate, you know, more powerfully at that time, right? But like I said before, if you have a commitment to this because you understand what this is, you can take a break. That's not going to change anything because you understand that you cannot afford to go backwards in this process. You can't afford it. Because like I said before, when I said if you're having too much trouble and you need to take a break, you know, go have a beer or whatever the case may be, right? The reason I said that is because if you don't make a full commitment and you stay involved with this, but not 100%, right? You're running the risk of creating more suffering than you've ever experienced. It can't be any worse than knowing there's a solution, right? But feeling totally at a loss in terms of your ability to experience that. That's worse suffering than you ever had, right? So don't let that happen. It won't happen if you see what is being said here is the truth, and if you make 100% commitment. You know, once you have that 100% commitment, then you can work with yourself. I'm 100% committed, right? But I have had breakdowns. I've had times when I wasn't able to keep up with what I I knew I needed to do. I'm still 100% committed. That will save your ass. That'll save your ass. But you have to maintain that kind of commitment to get through this, because as you well know, when you walk out of this room, right, you're back in the toilet. You're back in the everyday mental state of most people. And you have to deal with that, right? You have to deal with that. That's why they say the people that wake up and see things as they are, the relationship they have with the rest of the people who don't see that is compassion. Compassion. Because they understand this person's suffering unnecessarily. But you can't just tell somebody that. You know, if you've been around this stuff for a while now, you know, you can't just tell somebody that. You have to let them experience it. You have to let them experience it. And you have to love them just the way they are, right? This isn't about being a missionary. You have to love yourself just the way you are, right? You have to love yourself just the way you are in order for this work to work. And you have to love other people just the way they are in order for this work to work with them. So you have to just keep going. You know, I sometimes I think you guys think that I don't experience any of the shit you do. I experience the same shit you do every day. The difference is, see, this is the thing that you really have to, the difference is that's when that stuff happens, I'm not related to it like I believe it. I'm not related to it like it's true. I'm not related to it like it's real. So the effect of it on me is very minimal. That's the difference. But the same shit. It's like I said to you, I think I said it in the last class, you know. You know, if you knew the kind of stuff that goes through this mind, you would think your job is easy. If you knew some of the stuff that I've done in my life, you would say, if that guy did it, this can't be hard. Really, I'm serious about that. You know, a lot of the greatest teachers were the biggest fuck-ups. It's true. It's true. Because they had a lot more to lose, right? And you could only be that screwed up if you were very creative. So they used the creativity to be awake and alive instead of being dead and stupid. But I think it's important to be honest about that stuff. I'm not sitting here telling you that I'm a completely realized human being. That's not necessary. You don't have to become God, pure God, right? No, all you have to do is be a person who had learned the truth, and because of that, your life can be fulfilled. You can have a human life that's fulfilled. What's a fulfilled human life? You experience happiness. You experience freedom. You experience being fully alive and excited, right? You experience aliveness. And you don't have fear. What more could you want? Doesn't mean that that's the best package you could possibly get, right? And it's actually available. But you have to do what works in order to be able to cash in on it. And that's why I say, if you've been in this class for a while, if you've been, and most of you have been coming for a while now, if at this point you haven't noticed any difference, you're probably doing something wrong. I'm not saying there has to be the difference, the big difference, right? But by now you should be noticing what I'm talking about. You should be noticing that you can intervene. You can keep your mouth shut when you're about to put your foot in it. You can stop yourself when you're about to act out irrational, destructive anger. You can stop yourself, right? Or if you act it out, you can laugh right afterward because you know that's the mind trying to live your life for you, right? That's a big thing for you to understand, right? You're innocent. You're innocent, but you don't give yourself the experience of yourself as being innocent. You confuse yourself with the mind and the way the mind works, and you think that's you. And if you think that's you, you're really going to be stuck. You're really going to be stuck. So pay attention. Notice when that voice goes off. Notice in traffic when that voice goes off, right? Don't try and control it. Have a sense of humor. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It's not you. You can laugh about it. But you can only laugh about it if you see it for what it is. If you don't see it for what it is, it's just another angry moment in an angry life. All right, have a good evening.
Thank you.